If you look at the poll, what the key indication is right now in America, what everybody is talking about is they look at the 2016 final result and they compare it with two things: where he was in mid-September and where he was on the day before the election. And they do that with 2016 and 2000. In 2020, it's just stark that he was anywhere from 5 to 6 to 8 points nationally behind. He was 15 behind in Wisconsin, and yet he lost that by less than a point. Generally, it's about
In this video, Victor Davis Hanson dives into some really important topics that should make us stop and think. He talks about the unique personality of Donald Trump, someone who has divided opinions across the country. Hanson describes Trump as thin-skinned and blustering, but he also points out that for many, this is exactly what makes Trump appealing. Some see him as a bulldozer who pushes through and gets things done. And maybe that's what some people believe the country needs right now. Hanson also discusses immigration, which is one of the most pressing issues in the United States today. He points out how the country is facing a crisis at the southern border, where millions of people are entering the U.S. without going through the legal process. He asks the big question: what happens when a country can't control its borders? According to Hanson, this could lead to deep divisions and even threaten the foundations of American democracy. It's a scary thought, but one worth considering as the country decides what kind of future it wants. Another interesting point Hanson makes is about the role of the media. He argues that the mainstream media is no longer trustworthy and has a clear bias, especially against conservatives. Hanson believes that the media is overwhelmingly liberal and that they have an agenda that shapes how they report the news. He suggests that if there are going to be political debates in the future, we might need to look outside of mainstream media for fair moderators, maybe even from podcasts or independent sources. Hanson also touches on how Trump has performed in polls over the years, comparing his standings in 2016 and 2020. The polls often showed him behind, but Trump surprised everyone by doing better than expected. Right now, according to Hanson, Trump is even with his competitors in the polls. But if history repeats itself, this could actually mean he's ahead. One of the most thought-provoking parts of the video is Hanson's discussion on how immigration has shifted the political landscape. He explains that the number of people born outside the U.S. is at an all-time high, and many of them rely on government assistance. This, he argues, has pushed politics further to the left, as Democrats focus on issues like race, inequality, and immigration to gain support. However, Hanson also points out that historically immigrant groups have become more conservative over time, and this could happen again. Hanson finishes by talking about how important it is for the country to control its borders and limit immigration to preserve traditional American values. He warns that if immigration continues unchecked, it will feed into the Democratic Party's message of race and oppression, which most Americans don't support. According to Hanson, people don't want open borders, massive debt, or ideas like defunding the police.
We've known him for 9 years. We know he's thin-skinned, he's angry, he's blustering, and half the country believes that's part of the Trump mystique, that he's a bulldozer and he can't be anything else, but maybe you don't need anything else at this time. So I think that's pretty much where we are. And the other point was she's not telling us what she's going to do. She kept talking about her plan, I think, dozens of times, but she didn't spell out what it was. And then finally, she's trying to remake herself. She said she's woke. She said she's a radical. She said she wants to cancel patents, tax, all of that. And he didn't get in, unfortunately, to those details, but he did make the point that what she is now temporarily is not what she's been her entire life. But I think it's mostly will be known for discrediting the genre of having mainstream media moderators participate. If they're going to have debates, they're going to have to get people from the podcasting world or radio or other venues, authors, or I don't know whom, but they're going to have to come from something other than this corrupt media fusion, DNC conglomerate. If you look at the poll, what the key indication is right now in America, what everybody is talking about is they look at the 2016 final result and they compare it with two things: where he was in mid-September and where he was on the day before the election. And they do that with 2016 and 2000. In 2020, it's just stark that he was anywhere from 5 to 6 to 8 points nationally behind. He was 15 behind in Wisconsin, and yet he lost that by less than a point. Generally, it's about They undervalued him by about 6 points in 2020. In 2016, about 3 to 4. So Trump right now, New York Times had him 2 points ahead in the national poll, but the Real Clear averages have him about a half a point behind. If the history is still valid, then he would be actually ahead, and I think he is ahead. He had the momentum coming in. He had erased her entire convention bounce. She probably stopped that Trump surge by not blowing it in the way that she had in all of her other appearances. I think right now Trump is dead even in the polls, and that means he's actually ahead. Well, since the rise of television, I think it's a general rule that the media has been overwhelmingly liberal, but I didn't say left-wing. They were to the left, but they grew up in the age of print journalism, and there were certain protocols. And the New York Times was left-wing or liberal, but it wasn't necessarily dishonest, and it wasn't complete. The Washington Post or the New York Times or ABC, CBS, NPR, they feel that their agenda of forced equality, which they call equity, is so important and so moral and so humane that any mechanisms to get there are justified by that end. They completely flipped out with Donald Trump, and I think part of it was cultural. They didn't like his accent, they didn't like his appearance, they didn't like his mannerisms, they didn't like his lack of political experience, they didn't like his bluntness, and they felt that they had a right, along with the administrative state, to destroy him. And that's what they have almost done. So I don't think we've seen anything quite like that in the distant past, but there is a reason why a national presidential Republican has not won 51% of the popular vote since 1988 and lost 7 out of the last 8 popular votes. And that's because they are dealing with a uniformly hostile and activist media, along with other institutions like Silicon Valley corporations, entertainment, K through 12 academia. But it's very difficult for a conservative in this country. You got to remember also, immigration is such that we have 60 million people. It's an all-time high. It's an all-time percentage high at 16% of the resident population who were not born in the United States. I live in a state here in California, 27% of the people were not born in the United States, much less California. And the number of people on entitlements of some sort has soared in exponential fashion. So a lot of this move to the left is reflected in the media is just simply that we've got huge constituencies now who come here from other countries on a non-meritocratic basis and they feel, and they are in dire need of educational, health, housing, food, subsidies to achieve what I think we assume will be instant parity. Anything less than that is racist. And so we have a huge constituency. And when you have 70% of the people voting, not on election day, with very little effort to ensure authenticity of a mail-in or early ballot, you can see that the dynamic does not favor traditional Republican conservative America. I think if they can control the border, and if they can stop the 2.5 million people coming in from the most impoverished areas in the world, and if they can restore legal only 150,000 immigrants meritocratic, and then that infusion is halted, then the natural traditions of America will, by the second generation, we know, tend to make people conservative. For example, from 1890 to 1940, almost every Italian American was left-wing. If you say your name is Giuliani or Cuomo, nobody has any idea what your identification is. That was starting to really hasten, and still is with where I live. If you're a male with the name Lopez over 40, we don't know what your political affiliation is. That's not true of women or young people who are inordinately left-wing. But the point I'm making is the infusion of immigrants then creates constituencies and feeds this democratic propaganda of race, oppression, disequilibrium, inequality. So that's essential to their message, because most people do not believe in their agenda. They don't believe in an open border. They don't believe in these massive debts. They don't believe in critical race theory, defunding the police. None of these things have popular support.
If you enjoyed this video and want to stay up to date on more important topics, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and hit that subscribe button. Make sure you click the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest content. We've got more great discussions coming your way.